Well, hi everyone, and greetings from a snowy northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy. Today I'm going to continue my series on flat earthers versus scientists with one of my favorite subjects, the moon landings. So pop some corn, put on your oven mitts, and buckle up. Here we go.
Raise your hand if you think we went to the moon.
What is the proof? Hundreds and hundreds of pounds of moon rocks and dust. And we have distributed those freely to PhD scientists around the world. And not one of those geologists have said, what is this?
Been proven to be fake.
And also and collected on the ice in Antarctica and in the Arctic as well. Those are collected. You don't have to go to the moon to get moon rocks. As a matter of fact, all U.S. Air Force photography prior to 1958 shows a flat Earth. Only NASA shows a sphere. That's absolutely not true, Jim. I wouldn't lie to you.
You gotta love flat earthers, man. They're really a piece of work to watch and see how their minds work. All right, so first of all, we confront them with the fact that we have moon rocks and dust from the moon landings. And these rocks and dust have been shared with scientists all over the world and have been verified as not being of Earth. So what's their only response to this? Number one, we found all the moon rocks, which are indeed moon rocks, in Antarctica. Okay, no evidence presented for this. That's just a blanket statement out of left field. And then, with typical red herring enthusiasm, they say that all Air Force photography shows a flat Earth. What does that have to do with the moon landing, and how are they proving this? I mean, really? There was an object given to the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands by the American ambassador. It was not a NASA rock. It doesn't have provenance from a NASA rock. It's not listed in the catalog of all of the moon rocks from NASA. It was a chunk the size of my fist at a time that something like 20 kilograms of moon rocks existed on the Earth. This was October of 1969. And it was basically a laminated piece of cardboard. They gave it to him with some scotch tape on a rock. That turned out to be petrified wood. It was also red, by the way. How are you going to get oxidized material on the moon and something that is turned red? It doesn't make any sense. It stayed in his private collection until he died. And then, as part of his will, apparently, it was turned over to one of the museums in the Netherlands, and they found that it was a piece of petrified wood. The flat earthers had a field day on that. It's not an official NASA rock. There's no provenance for it, and it's not in the catalog. Yet, because it said something from the ambassador to what was at the time a private citizen in the Netherlands, they seem to think that somehow that invalidates all of the other moon rocks that are in existence and with governments all over the world.
The best anybody knows, Bob, it was just a gag gift.
Well, it could have been.
These guys were just having fun with each other.
Well, that could be the case, and they could have had that sort of relationship. Personally, I'd put salt in coffee or something other than involving the premier accomplishment of my country and mankind in general, and using that as a gag gift, but hell, that's just me.
By the way,
my question to you is, why? Why would all these honest, hardworking people perpetuate this massive fraud? Why would they do this?
What's the benefit of doing
Okay,
that?
the benefit of it. They make $52 million a day. Follow the money.
You know, if you think about how much energy the flat Earth takes into putting hate on NASA, if they had just put that energy into maybe learning some 8th grade science, wouldn't they be further ahead? You know, I always love this argument, $52 million. Well, how many people work for NASA? What percentage of the federal budget is NASA? What do we get for that money from NASA? All right, we've got an International Space Station. We launch satellites on a regular basis. They have basic science research that they do, both in space and on Earth. I mean, Christ, we got Tang out of it, and Velcro. That was worth $52 million a day. You know, what's the average NASA scientist make? $120,000, $130,000 a year? That's kind of like plumber's wages in some places. So the idea that there's this huge amount of money going to this agency and they have to have something to justify it is ridiculous. During the height of the Apollo program, they were getting 4% of the national budget. Now they're getting far less than 1% of the national budget, and they're still doing good science. So, yeah, it's worth it. And no, they don't need to falsify things in order to justify that piddly little budget they have. All right?
No, the little
Follow
guy.
the money.
The little guy.
That's what, then when you say all, okay?
But it didn't start out that way. And NASA was not founded to prove the Earth was a globe. It had nothing to do with the way they were founded.
Well, if you go and study
Are you sure?
Yeah, positive.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, I really hate to break this to you, but the flat earth community just is not important enough to have an entire governmental agency founded to combat them. You know, this is why we don't have a 24-hour camera sitting on the moon watching the Earth rotate to satisfy your paranoid delusions. We don't really care what you think. I mean, really, we don't. NASA was founded to explore space and advance aeronautics. And it's doing a very good job of it, thank you. And quite frankly, they really don't care if you believe them or not. And we don't either.
Somebody has to be a voice for reason, and somebody has to be a voice for truth. It would be a fantasy to believe that I would change anybody's mind from the other three. However, if there's somebody sitting on the fence, and this is the first introduction to this debate, perhaps they'll hear the reasonable voice and say, that makes more sense than having this pizza-shaped Earth.
And my friends, that in a nutshell is why we have debunking channels. That's the whole reason that I do this.
I can put myself in the mindset.
I used to be a ball earther. Everything you say right now is completely what I used to agree to. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
For me, I think the correct way to do any kind of investigation or to examine things is by literally putting yourself in that mindset of the other person. So I do that. I disagree with your position, but I completely understand from your perspective what you're saying.
The trouble I have understanding your perspective is, in the modern world, unless you live in a cave somewhere, you have to believe in science implicitly. I met a flat earther, a young woman who said, I don't trust anything that science does. And that's a problem because human beings can't replicate the whole body of science every single generation. At some point, you have to trust what's already been discovered and proven and move on to the next thing. Otherwise, we're not going to advance at all. I mean, when you turn that key ignition in your car, you expect the car to start out.
And not blow up.
And not blow up, because science puts you in that position. So it's really hard to understand how people would know in their hearts that science achieves wonderful things and then just jumping ship when it comes to this other issue.
You know, this is a major issue that we have with the flat earth, is they try and justify their belief in a flat earth by using something called the Zetetic Method. The Zetetic Method means that you cannot verify anything that you don't do yourself. The fact that we have sextants and spherical navigation to get ships all over the world is no good to somebody that believes in the flat earth, because they say that even though we use spherical geometry to navigate over the globe, that doesn't verify to us personally that the earth is a globe. Space doesn't exist unless you have personally gone to space. The fact that others have gone to space, people that are alive today have gone to space and have in fact gone to the moon, doesn't matter to them, because unless you personally verify it yourself, it can't be true. Now, to follow this through to the logical conclusion, in order to use fire, we each would have to develop fire ourselves. Then we'd have to develop the wheel. Then we'd have to personally develop the internal combustion engine. We'd have to learn to fly. We would have to learn to build a cell phone ourselves. We cannot rely on anybody else to do any of this technology or any of this basic science, because unless we do it ourselves, it's not real. Now, the fact that we have a photograph of the Earth called the Blue Marble photograph, which was a film camera photo taken in 1972, long before Photoshop was developed, and we have photographs of the curve of the Earth from V2 rockets going all the way back to 1946. This doesn't matter to them unless they can personally send a balloon up and visually confirm the curve themselves. So you show them a photograph of a curve that you personally took from an airplane. Oh, well, that's just distortion of the window. There's always other excuses, like the excuse that all true moon rocks were found in Antarctica. Okay, they can make a statement like that, or that the Air Force, every single photograph the Air Force has ever taken has shown a flat Earth. And, you know, you don't have to verify any of these things. They'll take those on faith, but they won't understand how a gyrocompass works.
I agree with you there, because we're the same thing. I mean, I think skeptics go through this and atheists go through this. I don't believe in God. When I'm around religious people, I take a chance socially when I tell them I'm an atheist. So I know it takes some courage to follow your beliefs, and I appreciate that. But I think I've done a lot of research in that venue too. And it's not something I choose to believe in, it's something I have to believe in based on the evidence.
See, what I get from you guys is that seeing is believing. So how come you believe in God or Jesus? You haven't seen neither of them, right?
I've seen evidence, though.
Well, exactly. So we are looking for evidence. There are many, many other evidences for Earth not being flat. My point is that these experiments clearly show that the Earth is globe.
You know, in reality, this is kind of sad. You can accept evidence that God exists, and there is no evidence that can prove the existence of God. That's why it's faith. Yet we show you curvature, we show you missing parts of mountains. We show you photographs of the entire Earth from space, and you can't accept that.
Your belief system in God and Jesus or Jehovah or Buddha or Zarathustra or anyone.
You keep going back to religion as being
because
our
it's coming
conclusion.
from there.
No,
You think you do have the
I
truth.
have evidence. I have evidence.
You
for
quoted
what
at the
I know.
beginning
She
of
pointed out
this.
physics.
You quoted Bible.
Of
That's
course
the
I did, but
reason.
that is not the only reason I know what the shape of the Earth is, and you keep, that's fallacy.
It's not fallacy.
It is a
Actually,
fallacy.
it is not fallacy.
It is a fallacy.
You know, isn't it just the way, if you can't figure out what somebody's talking about or they're destroying your position, start shouting fallacy.
What are you hoping to get from the discussion today?
Well, I hope I would be able, particularly to the young generation, to convince them that first, they should think critically and don't believe anything. They shouldn't take anything for granted. Look at the evidences and examine those evidences and throw away those claims that are not evidence-based.
Science, not to put it down, but when you're talking about rocket science, this is very difficult for the majority of people to understand, and it's designed that way.
You know, I'm going to try and unpack this a little bit. I'm kind of curious as to where Shelley's coming up with the concept of rocket science now. I think that what she's trying to say is that science is complex, and it is, but with rather basic training, sometimes even at the high school level, you can understand the vast majority of it. You can understand the fact that ships go over the horizon as you watch them go away from the shore and comprehend the idea that maybe they're going over a curve. Or you can see a shadow cast by a mountain on the clouds above the mountain and realize that the light source is coming from below the peak of the mountain. These are not complex and exclusive concepts designed to exclude the vast majority of people from comprehending science. You can choose not to comprehend science, but that doesn't mean that you're unable to comprehend the science.
And so, in a lot of ways, hiding behind rocket science is similar to religion. If you look at the Catholic Church back in the days, only we can interpret the Bible. You have to listen to what we say.
Well, once again, this is a false premise. Now, the Protestant Reformation was something that came about as a result of this. The Catholic Church traditionally made the priest your link to God, whereas the Protestants came out and said that every person could individually relate to God. And this has to do more with Shelley's religious zealotry than her understanding and comprehension of science, because this isn't the way science works. Anybody can get training in science. We're all mandated to have some training in science during our primary education. Some of us go on to college and advanced studies and learn more about it. But we all come out of high school with a basic comprehension of how the world works. And to say that we have to rely on people with PhDs to explain to us basic processes, such as ships going over the horizon and shadows being cast on clouds above mountains, is...
So in a lot of ways, we're getting that same notion from science that says, only we can interpret what these numbers are. You just need to trust us. But then when we actually do go and test some of their equations and they don't work, does that beg the question for us to go and test it ourselves? Absolutely.
No, Shelley. It begs the question that maybe you should learn a little bit more about the formula and figure out where you went wrong. Because the formulas do work. The curve calculator precisely tells how much of a building or a ship should be visible at a certain distance from a specific observation height. And any variation of that is easily understandable if you just look at the processes involved. So you saying that the equations and the formulas don't work is more, it more speaks to your misunderstanding of the formulas and the equation than the fact that they are invalid.
I would say, one great thing about science is its predictability. Let's for a short moment, assume that your model, this flat Earth model, is correct. I don't know, what does it buy for us? What does it predict for us? So my question for you guys would be, next time, bring me something from your theory, your model, that you can predict something which the globe Earth model cannot predict. Then I would change my mind.
Now, this is a key concept in science that the flat Earth doesn't seem to understand very well. We come up with models in science to try and explain things that we observe in nature. Not only explain them, but we try and be able to make predictions based on those models. Now, examples of this would be Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics did not precisely explain the orbit of Mercury. So we realized that there was a little problem with it. And the result was we came up with general relativity, which did explain the orbit of Mercury to a much higher degree of precision. However, Newtonian physics was very good in explaining the vast majority of what we saw in nature. For example, it predicted the location of a planet based on the orbits of other planets. They were off from what we expected, and it looked as though there was a mass in this specific location acting on those orbits and those planets and making them deviate a little bit. We looked in that location and we found a planet there. It worked very nicely to make a prediction. Flat Earth cannot make predictions.
I would just say that don't believe anything that I've said. You got to do your own research. And I think what you'll find is that you'll see that a puzzle piece doesn't fit. And the only way you're going to do that is if you put your own eyeballs on it.
I don't blame people for being skeptical. I'm skeptical about a lot of different things. I applaud that instinct in you. But you have to go beyond just not believing in something. Ask the hard questions. Ask what qualifies a YouTuber, a book author, anywhere else you're getting this information. What qualifies them to make wide-ranging comments about the shape of the Earth? look, anybody who can overturn Einstein or some major theory is going to be eventually written in the halls of science for the rest of their lives. But they have to come up with the goods. They have to show good science-based evidence that what they say is true, and they have to withstand the test of time and peer review and the rigors of the scientific method.
All right. Thank you. I'm all sweaty.
And ladies and gents, basically there you have it. Science is always looking for new ideas. They're looking for better solutions to problems that the old solutions don't fully explain. Now, someday somebody is going to overturn Einstein just as Einstein, in a way, overturned Newton. Somebody will come up with a better way of describing the universe than Einstein had. There's nothing wrong with that, and we in science embrace that type of innovation. But having a YouTube video out there claiming that the Earth is flat from somebody that claims to overcome Einstein and Newton, yet cannot describe the internal angles of an equilateral triangle, this is very suspect. And I think that that's one of the things that we as YouTube debunkers have to do, and that is we have to point out these errors in basic science, whereas you can make this assertion all you want, but it doesn't stand up to peer review. It doesn't stand up to measurement. Your observation is demonstrably shown to be incorrect. You know, one thing that really comes to mind is Jay Tolan Media One, where he makes all of these elaborate measurements on these beautiful infrared photographs that he takes, yet cannot identify basic landmarks on the mountain, and misidentifies them as being in different locations than they truly are. That's what a debunker does, is we look for these inconsistencies and point them out. It's up to you, the viewers, to use your God-given brains to understand and comprehend what these glaring errors mean as far as the assertions that these YouTube creators are making. Take a moment, hit that little like and subscribe button down in the lower right corner. Really appreciate having you on Team Bob. You can check out my Patreon and website. We're going to have some really interesting things on it pretty soon. So, signing out from Northern Michigan, this is Bob the Science Guy. We'll see you again soon.